I never thought I would be writing a post like this. 4 years ago, I found a baby girl lying in the street, wrapped in a dirty blanket. Now, her biological mother is back and she wants her daughter back. I'm a white doctor, in my late 30s. I've always wanted to have kids, but life didn't go the way I planned. My job kept me busy, and I wasn't really in a serious relationship until recently. But one cold night in the middle of a shift, my life changed. I was walking back to my car after a long day at the hospital. It was late, and the streets were empty, except for some stray dogs searching for food. Then I heard a soft cry. I turned, thinking it was an animal at first, but then I saw her. A tiny, dark-skinned baby girl no more than a few months old crying alone on the street. There was no one around. The city was quiet. I ran over and immediately checked to see if she was okay. She was cold, hungry, and her skin was pale from being out in the night air too long. I had no idea who left her there, but I didn't care. I scooped her up and took her to the hospital. At first, the doctors were concerned about her health. She had some minor infections from being left outside, but nothing too serious. She was stable. They tried to find her parents, but no one came forward. It was a rough few days, but I couldn't shake the feeling that this little girl needed me. After all the legal steps, and with no one stepping up to claim her, I decided to adopt her. It felt right. She needed a home, and I wanted to give her one. I named her Amara, which means grace in some languages, because that's what she brought to my life. Raising Amara was hard at first. She didn't trust me fully, and it broke my heart. She cried a lot at night, sometimes waking up screaming. But over time, I learned to calm her, to hold her, and to love her with all my heart. She grew into a sweet, curious little girl. Despite everything she'd been through, Amara blossomed into someone so full of life and joy. But there were always question zones I couldn't answer. People asked why Amara's skin was so much darker than mine. I never knew what to say except the truth. That she was my daughter, and that's all that mattered. I remember how some people looked at us with pity or confusion, but I didn't care. I loved her. It wasn't easy, though. There were moments when I'd see the difference in the way she was treated compared to other kids. When we'd go to the park, other parents would look at me with unease, as if they couldn't understand why a white woman would adopt a black child. I could feel their judgment, even when they didn't say anything. But Amara never noticed. She was too young to understand. She called me Mama, and I was her world. I was happy. We were happy. Then, last month, I got a letter in the mail. It was from a woman named Tasha. She said she was Amara's biological mother. She explained that she had been young, homeless, and struggling when she had Amara. She said she couldn't care for her, and that's why she had left her in the street. But now, things were different. She had gotten herself together. She was working, she had a stable life, and she wanted her daughter back. I was shocked. I didn't know how to feel. I kept reading the letter over and over, trying to make sense of it. Tasha wanted to meet, to talk about Amara. I could feel the pit in my stomach growing. I had no idea what to do. I had raised Amara. She was my daughter now. But what if she needed her real mother? What if I wasn't the right person for her? I agreed to meet Tasha. I didn't know what else to do. She asked to meet at a coffee shop, and I reluctantly agreed. When I saw her for the first time, I was taken aback. She was nothing like I imagined. She was older than me, but she had the same dark eyes as Amara. Her face was marked with years of struggle, but there was something in her, something soft, almost desperate, like she just wanted to fix everything that had gone wrong in her life. Tasha cried when she saw me. She told me that she had thought about Amara every day, that she had always regretted leaving her. She said she knew it was her fault, but now she was ready to be the mother she should have been. She asked if I would let her have Amara. I didn't know what to say. My heart was heavy. It was like someone had taken everything I had worked for, everything I had built with Amara, and was asking me to just hand it over. But I couldn't do that. I couldn't just let go of my daughter. She was mine. She had always been mine. We talked for hours that day. I told Tasha that Amara was happy, that she was loved, that she had a life nowhere life. And I didn't want to take that from her. But I also knew I couldn't just turn my back on Tasha. I knew how badly she wanted to be part of her daughter's life. So we agreed to keep in touch. Tasha would see Amara every few weeks, but I would stay her primary mother. It wasn't easy. Amara started asking questions that I didn't have the answers to. She asked why her skin was different from mine, why she didn't look like the other kids at school. I told her the truth, as much as I could. I told her that her mother was different, but that didn't change the fact that I was her mom. Amara still didn't fully understand, but she trusted me. And I trusted that I could help her navigate this new chapter in her life. But I'm still scared. I'm scared that one day Amara will want to go live with her birth mother. I'm scared that all the love I've given her won't be enough. I'm scared that no matter how much I try, I'll never truly be her real mom in the way that Tasha could. I don't know what the future holds, but I do know this. Amara is my daughter. I love her with all my heart, and I will fight for her no matter what. The weeks after that meeting with Tasha were a blur. I could see the change in Amara, even though she didn't say much. She'd sometimes get quiet when we were together, like she was thinking about something she didn't fully understand. At night, she'd wake up, and I'd find her staring at the wall, her little brow furrowed as if she was trying to piece everything together in her head. I tried to reassure her, telling her that nothing had changed, that we were a family. But the more I said it, the less sure I felt. How could I convince her that this was her home when there was another woman out there, the woman who had given birth to her? How could I explain that love doesn't always come in the form you expect? Tasha started coming around more. At first, I kept the visits brief short trips to the park, little outings where I could supervise and keep things controlled. But every time Tasha would show up, I'd see Amara light up. She'd smile in a way I hadn't seen before. There was a tenderness in her eyes, something that was reserved just for her birth mother. I tried not to feel threatened, but it was hard. The more I saw them together, the more I realized that there was a bond between them that I could never replicate. It wasn't a bond that was easily broken, even after all this time. One day, Tasha asked if she could take Amara for a weekend. She promised she wouldn't overstep, that she just wanted to spend some quality time with her. I hesitated, but I agreed. I needed to trust that this would be okay. That weekend felt like an eternity. I spent the first few hours pacing the house, unsure of what to do with myself. I'd never been away from Amara for that long, and the silence in the house was suffocating. I kept checking my phone, waiting for an update, for some sign that everything was all right. When Amara came back, she was different. She seemed distant, like she was somewhere else in her mind. She didn't greet me with her usual hug or her big smile. Instead, she just walked inside and went straight to her room. I gave her space, but the next day I sat down with her. I asked if something had happened during the weekend. She looked up at me, her eyes wide and sad. "I like being with Mama Tasha too," she said softly. The words cut me like a knife. I nodded, forcing myself to keep my composure. "I'm glad you had a good time with her, baby," I said. "But remember, I'm your mama. I'm always here." She didn't answer right away, but later that night, she climbed into my bed, curled up beside me, and whispered, "I love you, Mom." It was all I needed to hear. I held her close, not knowing what the future would look like, but knowing that I couldn't stop loving her. I couldn't make the bond between her and Tasha go away, and I wasn't sure if I should even try. But I had to remind myself that love isn't a competition. It's not about who loves her more or who has the right to call her theirs. It's about being there for her, no matter what. Over the next few months, things slowly settled into a routine. Tasha would visit, and I'd watch as she and Amara grew closer. I tried not to let my insecurities get in the way. I could see that Amara was learning more about her background, about the history that I couldn't provide. I would hear her ask questions about her birth father, about why she didn't look like her friends, about what life might have been like if Tasha had been able to raise her. I didn't have all the answers, but I did my best to provide the ones I could. I told her that family isn't just about blood, it's about who shows up for you, who loves you when the world feels too big and too scared. I told her that no matter where she came from, she belonged with me just as much as she belonged with Tasha. One day, Tasha called me. She sounded different this time, nervous, unsure of herself. "I've been thinking," she said, "about what you said, about how family is more than just blood. And I want to make sure Amara knows that she has both of us. I don't want her to feel torn between us, like she has to choose. I want her to know that she's loved, no matter what." Hey there, if this story moved you, don't forget to hit subscribe to join me for more powerful real-life stories that spark change and inspire strength. Together, we can explore stories of resilience, justice, and the moments that make a difference. Your support helps amplify voices that need to be heard, so let's grow this community of changemakers. Click subscribe now, and let's continue this journey together. I was quiet for a moment, letting her words sink in. I agree, I said, feeling the weight of it all. We need to do this together. For her, she deserves that. Tasha and I talked for a long time that night about what it meant to co-parent, about what our roles were in Amara's life. We didn't have all the answers, and there were still moments where things felt tense or uncertain, but we both agreed that Amara's happiness came first. I don't know what the future holds for us. I don't know if Amara will want to live with Tasha one day or if she'll decide that I'm her real mom. What I do know is that I will love her, no matter what. I'll give her the space she needs to grow, to learn about who she is, and to love both of us in her own way. It's hard sometimes. There are days when I feel like I'm losing her, or like I'll never be enough. But I remind myself that love isn't about possession, it's about giving someone the freedom to be who they are, and knowing that no matter what, you'll always be there for them. Amara is mine, in every way that matters, and I will never stop being her mom. As the months passed, I began to see Amara change in subtle but powerful ways. She started to ask more questions about her history, about the world around her, and about the people she loved. I could tell she was navigating her identitying to understand her place in the world and trying to reconcile the two mothers who loved her. One afternoon, she came home from school looking a bit more serious than usual. I had just finished a long day at the hospital and was making dinner when I heard her voice from the hallway. "Mom, can I talk to you about something?" I looked over at her, wiping my hands on the kitchen towel. "Of course, baby, what's on your mind?" She hesitated, then walked over and sat down beside me at the kitchen table. "Some kids at school, they asked me why I don't look like you, and they said I wasn't really your daughter because my skin is darker. I told them you're my mom, and it doesn't matter what I look like. But I was wondering, is it true?" I felt my heart drop. I had seen the confusion in her eyes that morning, but I didn't know she was carrying it with her. I pulled her close, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear, and took a deep breath. "Amara, let me tell you something. You are my daughter, not because we look the same, but because I love you with all my heart. You didn't come from my body, but you came into my life and changed everything. You are my daughter in every way that matters. Don't ever forget that, okay?" She looked up at me, her big brown eyes searching my face for reassurance. I could see the weight of her words sinking in, and I wanted her to understand, to know without a doubt, that she was loved exactly as she was. "I love you too, Mama," she said softly, her voice a little shaky. "Good," I whispered, kissing the top of her head. "And the color of your skin? That's just one part of who you are. It doesn't change anything about how much I love you." For the first time in a while, I felt like maybe, just maybe, I was getting through to her. She was processing everything, the questions, the differences, the complexities of her own identity, and it was all happening too fast for her. But I knew I couldn't shield her from the world forever. All I could do was be there to help her through. That night when she went to bed, she asked if she could write a letter to Tasha. I nodded, surprised but happy. She wanted to tell her birth mother about what had happened at school and how she was feeling. I gave her some space to write, and a few hours later she came out, holding the letter in her small hands. "I finished it, Mama," she said, her voice filled with a mixture of excitement and nervousness. I smiled and hugged her tightly. "Do you want me to help you send it, or would you like to do it on your own?" She thought for a moment, then said, "I'll do it. I want her to know I'm okay." I couldn't be more proud of her in that moment. My heart swelled with love as I watched her take the letter and carefully tuck it into an envelope. She was growing, changing, and finding her voice, even in a world that sometimes seemed confusing and unfair. The next week, Tasha reached out to me. She said she'd received Amara's letter and wanted to meet us again. I wasn't sure how I felt about it, but I agreed to meet at the park. I knew Amara needed to feel connected to her birth mother, just as much as she needed to feel secure with me. That day, when we met, Amara was a little more reserved than usual. She didn't rush to Tasha like she had before. Instead, she held my hand, standing beside me as Tasha approached. It felt different, more like a meeting of equals than a reunion. Tasha smiled warmly at Amara, but there was a tenderness in her eyes that made me realize she understood the complexity of the situation. "You okay?" Tasha asked, kneeling down to Amara's level. Amara nodded slowly. "Yeah, I just wanted to make sure you knew I'm fine. I'm happy with Mom." I felt my chest tighten as Tasha glanced at me. There was a moment of silence before Tasha spoke again. "I know I can't change the past, Amara, and I don't want to take away the love you have with your mama, but I want you to know I'll always love you, no matter what." Amara smiled softly, still holding my hand. "I know, I love you too." And in that moment, I realized that this was the most we could ask, for the understanding that love doesn't have to be limited or exclusive. Tasha had her place in Amara's life, and so did I. We were both her mothers, in different ways, but we both shared the same love. Over the next few months, things slowly became more comfortable between Tasha and me. There were still moments of awkwardness, but we both tried to find common ground. We spoke about what it meant to co-parent, to ensure that Amara felt loved and supported by both of us, without feeling torn between two worlds. Amara continued to grow, her sense of self becoming more solid with each passing day. She was more confident in who she was, no longer defined by her appearance or the questions of others. She had learned to embrace both sides of her identity, her Black heritage, and her place in our family. She still had questions. She still had moments where she struggled with the complexities of her story. But she knew one thing for sure: she was loved. And no matter what, she would always have a place to call home. One evening, as I tucked her into bed, she looked up at me and said, "I'm happy, Mama. I think I understand now." I kissed her forehead, holding her for a moment longer than usual. "I'm happy too, baby. I'm so proud of you." And as I turned off the lights and closed the door, I realized that, in the end, love wasn't something we had to prove. It was something we just gave freely, without hesitation, without condition. Amara was my daughter, and she always would be. And no matter where her journey took her, she would always have a place where she was loved beyond measure. As the years passed, the balance between Tasha and me evolved, just as Amara did. She grew from a quiet, thoughtful little girl into a confident, smart young woman, and I could see the threads of both her worlds weaving together inside her. The questions about her identity didn't go away, but they became less about the pain of feeling torn and more about embracing the unique parts of herself that made her who she was. When she turned 10, I noticed a change in how she spoke about her birth mother. She was more open about her connection with Tasha, more comfortable in her dual identity. At the same time, she would tell me, without hesitation, how much she loved me, her forever mom. It wasn't always easy. Sometimes she would get frustrated, especially when people would make assumptions about her. I'd hear her explain to other kids that I wasn't her real mom, but that her real mom was the woman who loved her and raised her. And when the questions came about why she looked the way she did, about who she was supposed to besh, answered them with a quiet strength that left me in awe. I also watched as she began to form her own understanding of race, of history, and of what it meant to be Black in a world that often treated her differently because of her skin. I could see the frustration in her eyes when she would read about injustices in history or watch news stories about the challenges Black people face every day. I didn't have all the answers for her, but I did my best to listen, to let her talk about her feelings and fear. One evening, after a difficult conversation with some classmates at school, Amara came to me and asked, "Mama, how do I deal with people who look at me differently just because of my skin color? I know I should be proud of who I am, but sometimes it's hard." I felt a lump in my throat. I had spent years trying to protect her from the harsh realities of the world, but I knew she had to face them eventually. I took her hand and said, "You're right, babe. It is hard. But don't ever forget, your skin is a part of what makes you amazing. It's a part of your story, your strength, and your beauty. People might not always understand, but you don't need their approval. You've got everything you need inside you to rise above." Amara smiled, but I could see the doubt in her eyes. She was still learning how to navigate the complexity of being Black and raised by a white woman in a world full of contradictions, but I knew she wasn't alone. She had both of us, me, her mama, and Tasha, her birth month. A few months later, something happened that made me realize just how much Amara had grown. We were at the park, just the two of us, when we ran into some old friends. One of them, a white woman I'd known for years, was surprised to see Amara so grown up. "She's looking so much like you these days," my friend commented, smiling at Amara. Amara glanced up at her, then at me, and for the first time I saw her take a deep breath before answering. "I'm her daughter," Amara said, her voice calm but sure. "But I'm also my mom's daughter. I have two moms, and I'm proud of both of them." The way she said it, without hesitation or fear, filled me with pride. She had finally come to terms with the fact that her story wasn't something to hide. It was something to embrace, in all its complexity. Over the next few years, Tasha and I grew closer too. We had our occasional disagreements, but they became fewer as we realized that we both wanted the same thing for Amara, for her to feel loved, supported, and secure. We were no longer two women vying for Amara's affection. Instead, we had become a team, each playing a part in the life of a little girl who was now becoming a young woman with a clear sense of self. When Amara was in her early teens, she started asking about her birth father. Tasha had always been hesitant to speak about him, but she opened up a little bit more. We talked about him together, about the mistakes he'd made and the choices that had led to his absence in her life. It was a difficult conversation, but I was there for Amara every step of the way, answering her questions and letting her process her feelings. Tasha was there too, sharing what she could without feeling guilty about the things that had gone wrong. Amara seemed to understand, but I could see that there were still moments of longing. She didn't talk about her birth father much, but I could tell that she had a piece of him inside her, a piece that would always be there, even if she never met him. On her 16th birthday, we had a small party at home. It was a celebration of her life, of all she had become, and of the journey she had been on. She had grown into an intelligent, strong, beautiful young woman who was more than capable of navigating the world with grace. She had become a bridge between two world-sure mothers, and and she had found a way to make both parts of herself proud. During the party, Amara pulled me aside, away from the noise of the music and the chatter of the guests. "Thank you, Mama," she said, looking at me with those same big brown eyes that had once been filled with uncertainty. "Thank you for always being there for me, for loving me when it was hard. I don't think I say it enough, but I'm really glad you're my mom." Tears welled up in my eyes as I hugged her. "You don't have to thank me, baby. I've always been proud of you. You're amazing, and I'm lucky to be your mom." And in that moment, I knew that all the struggles, all the pain, and all the uncertainty had been worth it. We were a family, not because of the way we looked, but because of the love we shared. Amara had found her way, and I had found Minna right beside her. No matter where life took her, I knew that we would always have each other, and that was enough. As Amara grew older, her world expanded beyond the confines of our small family, and I began to see the incredible young woman she was becoming. She became more involved in school activities, found her passion for art, and started making plans for her future. I watched as she faced the world with the strength and resilience that she had inherited from both her birth mother and me. I was proud, but I also knew that the road ahead wouldn't always be easy for her. The world often made her feel like she had to pick a side, like she couldn't fully belong in both spaces. But I was determined to make sure she knew that she didn't have to choose between her two worlds. Around the time she turned 18, I noticed something shifting in her. She was starting to talk more about her heritage, her Black identity, and the struggles she faced. She became more vocal about social justice issues, wanting to use her art as a platform to speak out. Tasha, as always, was supportive, encouraging Amara to embrace her roots and use her voice to make a difference. One afternoon, after a particularly heated discussion about racial inequality at school, Amara came to me, her face flushed with emotion. "I don't know if I'm doing enough," she said, her voice shaking. "I feel like I should be doing more to stand up for my people, for what's right. But sometimes I don't even know where to start." I sat down beside her, taking her hand gently in mine. "Amara, I know it's hard, and I know you're carrying a lot of weight, trying to make a difference in this world. But don't ever think that just because you're one person, you don't have the power to change things. Your voice, your art, your passion, those things matter. You don't have to change the whole world overnight. You just have to keep speaking the truth. Keep being the incredible person you are. That's all anyone can ask of you. Amara looked at me, her eyes searching mine as if looking for reassurance. But sometimes I feel like I'm torn between two worlds. Like, I'm not black enough for the black community and not white enough for the white community. Like I'm always in between. I squeezed her hand, my heart aching for her. I understand, and I think it's okay to feel like you don't fit perfectly into one box. You're not meant to fit into just one place, Amar. You are both. You are everything you choose to be. And you don't have to prove anything to anyone. She smiled softly, nodding. I could see that she was starting to make peace with the complexity of her identity. She was beginning to understand that her story, the story of being loved by both a black mother and a white one, wasn't something to feel ashamed of. It was her unique strength, the thing that made her who she was. As Amara prepared for college, we had a conversation about her future. She was accepted into a prestigious art school across the country, and it felt like both a dream come true and a bittersweet moment for me. She was going to be so far away, and I knew that this would be another chapter of her life where she would have to navigate the world without me there every day. But I also knew that she was ready. "Are you sure you're ready for this, baby?" I asked, sitting with her in her room as she packed up her things. She smiled at me, her eyes full of determination. "I'm nervous, but I'm ready. I've learned a lot from both of you, Mom. I've learned that I can be whoever I want to be, and I can be proud of who I am, no matter where I go or who I meet." I hugged her tightly, feeling the weight of the moment. "I'm so proud of you, Amara. I always have been, and I always will be." "I'll miss you, Mama," she whispered, her voice breaking slightly. "But I know I'll be okay." And just like that, she was off. She left for college, and I was left with the quiet emptiness of our home. But as I watched her thrive, meeting new people and making a name for herself in the art world, I realized that my little girl was no longer a little girl. She had become a woman with her own voice, her own path, and her own purpose. Tasha and I continued to keep in touch, and as time passed, I realized just how much we had both changed. We weren't the same women who had met in that coffee shop all those years ago. We had learned to respect each other's role in Amara's life, and while there were still moments of discomfort, we had both come to understand that we didn't have to compete for her love. We were both part of her story, and that was enough. One day, Amara called me from college, excited to tell me that she had been asked to showcase some of her artwork in a gallery in the city. It was a huge opportunity, and I could hear the pride in her voice as she told me about it. "I'm doing this for all of us, Mama," she said. "For you, for Tasha, for everything we've been through." I couldn't stop the tears from welling up. Our daughter had turned into a woman who was making her mark on the world, using the very things that had once made her feel different to inspire others. She was using her voice, her art, to tell her story. "I'm so proud of you, Amara," I whispered into the phone, my heart full. "I always knew you'd do amazing things." And I knew, deep down, that this wasn't just about art or success. It was about the journey we had taken together, the bond that had formed between us despite the challenges, despite the differences. It was about the love we shared, a love that would carry us through every chapter, every challenge, and every triumph. As I watched Amara step into her future, confident and fearless, I realized that she had become everything I had hoped for and more. She had found her place in the world, her identity, and the strength to navigate it all. And in the end, she wasn't just my daughter, or just Tasha's daughter. She was her own person, someone whose story was uniquely her own, and who would continue to write that story with grace, courage, and love. No matter where she went, she would always be a part of both of us, and I knew no matter what, we'd always be there for her. As Amara's life flourished, so did the bond between Tasha and me. It had taken years of growing, learning, and sometimes stumbling, but we had found a way to navigate the complexities of our shared role in Amara's life. We had moved past any lingering doubts or insecurity. Tasha and I spoke frequently, and I began to realize just how much I appreciated her perspective, how much I understood her struggles as a mother, and how much I wanted to continue supporting her, just as I had always wanted to support Amara. It wasn't perfect co-parenting across different backgrounds, with different histories, wasn't ever going to be entirely without friction, but we had found a way to trust each other. In fact, Tasha had become a more active part of Amara's life as she settled into her career, even coming to some of her gallery openings and other art shows. She was so proud of Amara, and it was clear in the way she spoke about her. I remember one day, a few months after Amara's first gallery showing, Tasha and I met for coffee. We sat at a small cafe, just talking about the ups and downs of life or shared joys, and the challenges we had faced as mothers. You know, when I first met you, I never imagined we'd be sitting here talking like this, Tasha said, laughing softly. I didn't know how it would all work. I was scared. I thought, you'd never understand what it was like to let my daughter go. I was scared too, I admitted, stirring my coffee absent-mindedly. I think we were both afraid. But we learned. Amara taught us more than we could have ever taught her. Tasha smiled, her face softening as she thought about Amara. She really did. She's always been so much stronger than I ever realized. I think she gets that from both of us, I replied with a wink. We both laughed, the conversation drifting toward how we had both managed to support Amara in different ways. It was clear that while our paths had been different, our goals were aligned. We both wanted the same thing for Amara, a life where she could thrive as her true self, unburdened by any doubts or fears, with the freedom to express all of who she was. That afternoon, as we parted ways, I felt a sense of peace that I hadn't known before. It wasn't just about Amara's success or the things she'd accomplished. It was about the way we had learned to trust each other, to respect each other, and to give Amara the space to find her own identity without feeling torn between two worlds. We had managed, over the years, to make sure that no matter what, Amara never had to choose between us. As I drove home, I thought about how much had changed since the day I found Amara on that street. That small, helpless baby had become a young woman with a future full of possibility, and it was clear to me that she would continue to forge her path with both of us in her corner. The next few months brought more milestones for Amara. She graduated from art school with honors, her work gaining attention from influential galleries across the country. There were moments when I would catch myself staring at her, amazed at how far she'd come, not just as an artist, but as a person. She had learned to embrace the fullness of her identity, accepting both her past and her present. She had forged a future that was uniquely her own, and I knew she was just beginning. On the day of her graduation, Tasha and I sat in the audience together, both of us beaming with pride. Amara had called us both her biggest supporters during her speech, and the words filled me with a deep sense of gratitude. It wasn't always easy, but watching her thrive, watching her speak her truth, and be proud of who she was, it made everything worth it. Later that evening, at a small gathering to celebrate, I pulled Amara aside for a moment of quiet. Amara, I am so proud of you, I said, my voice full of emotion. You've worked so hard, and you've become everything I've ever hoped for and more. She smiled at me, her eyes reflecting a calm confidence I hadn't always seen. I couldn't have done it without you, Mama. You've always been there for me. You made me believe in myself, even when I didn't. Tears welled up in my eyes, and I pulled her into a tight hug. I love you, baby, and I always will. And then, unexpectedly, she said something that I had never quite expected to hear. I know, Mama, and you know what? I feel like I finally get it. I'm not torn between two worlds anymore. I'm exactly who I'm supposed to be, and I'm proud of it. Those words spoken from the heart of the girl I had raised felt like a gift. It was as if everything had come full circle. She had learned, in her own time, that the complexities of her identity were not something to fear. They were something to be proud of. As I watched her step forward into this next chapter of her life, I knew that no matter where she went, no matter what challenges she would face, she would always have a place to call home. And that, no matter what, we would always be there, both Tasha and I, holding her up, loving her, and giving her the space to be exactly who she was meant to be. In the end, that's all any of us really need. A space where we can be ourselves without fear, without regret, and without the pressure to fit into any mold. We all just need to be loved for who we are. And I knew without a doubt that Amara had that. She had everything she needed. And so, as I watched her leave the next day for her first solo gallery showing, I whispered to myself, I did my best, and she's going to be okay. The months after Amara's graduation seemed to fly by. She settled into her new life in a bustling city, surrounded by other young artists and creatives. It was both exciting and terrifying for me, watching her embrace this new chapter with such confidence. She was living in an apartment on her own now, making a name for herself in the art world, and although I missed her terribly, I couldn't have been prouder. Tasha and I stayed in touch, and our bond only grew stronger over time. We often talked about how different things were now compared to when Amara was younger, and we both marveled at how far she'd come. But as proud as I was, there was still a part of me that couldn't help but worry. Was she truly ready for the world out there? Was she still carrying the weight of all the things we'd faced together, all the questions she'd had about her identity and her place in the world? One evening, about 6 months after she'd moved, I got a call from Amara. I hadn't heard from her in a few weeks, so when I saw her name flash on my phone, I answered immediately. Mama, I miss you so much, she said, her voice bubbling with excitement. I wanted to tell you something important. I could hear the joy in her voice, but there was also something else, something that made my heart race. What is it, baby? I've been offered a solo exhibition, she said, her words almost tumbling out in her excitement. It's in New York City, at a gallery I've been dying to work with. They saw my work online and loved it. They want to showcase a whole collection of my pieces next month. Tears welled up in my eyes as I processed her words. Amara, that's amazing. I'm so proud of you. I can't believe it. You've worked so hard for this. I couldn't have done it without you, Mama, she replied, her voice softening. You believed in me when I didn't. You showed me that I could do anything, even when I didn't feel like I belonged. I could feel the pride in her words, and it filled my heart. I knew that she had finally found her place in the world, not just as an artist, but as a young woman who had embraced everything she was, everything she came from. I'm coming to New York for the exhibition, I said, my voice trembling. I wouldn't miss it for the world. A moment of silence passed before Amara responded, her voice almost wistful. I'm glad, Mama. I really am. But I've been thinking a lot about something, about us. My heart skipped a beat, and I sat down, unsure of where this conversation was headed. What do you mean, honey? I asked, my voice quieter now, more cautious. I think it's time for me to step into my own fully. I've been thinking about how I've always had both of you, how I've always had a place with you and with Tosh, and I'm so grateful for that. But now that I'm getting older, I think it's time I figure out how to create space for myself. Not just as your daughter or her daughter, but as me. As Amara. The words stung a little. I knew she was finding herself more and more, and that was a beautiful thing, but a part of me felt a little lost in the process. I had spent years being her constant, her support system, and now it felt like she was telling me she was ready to do things on her own. I understand, I said softly, swallowing the lump in my throat. I think that's a natural part of growing up. You've always been so strong, Amara, and I've always wanted you to find your own way. I'll always be here for you, no matter what, but I know you need to find your own path too. She sighed, a sound of relief mixed with uncertainty. I know, Mama, it's just, I don't want you to feel like I'm pulling away. It's not that I don't need you. I just need to find my own space, figure out who I am in this world, beyond being someone's daughter. I get it, I whispered, and I'll always be proud of who you become. I just want you to be happy, whatever that looks like. There was a pause, and then Amara said, I think I'm getting there, Mama. I really do, and having you in my life, no matter where I go or what I do, is part of what keeps me grounded. The conversation ended with both of us knowing that while our roles in each other's lives were shifting, the love and support would always remain. I felt a pang of sadness, but also a sense of pride that she was able to stand on her own. She had become everything I had hoped for: confident, capable, and fearless in the face of an uncertain world. Amara's exhibition in New York was a massive success. She showcased a stunning collection of paintings that explored themes of identity, race, and belonging, topics that were close to her heart. I watched her at the opening, surrounded by art critics and admirers, her face glowing with excitement. I had never seen her so alive, so sure of herself. Later, when the exhibition was winding down, she pulled me aside, away from the crowd. "You made this possible, Mama," she said, looking into my eyes. "Your love, your belief in me got me here. I couldn't have done it without you." I hugged her tightly, knowing that in that moment, we had both come full circle. She had found herself, and so had I. We had both learned to let go a little, to let the other grow, but we had done it with love. And now here she was, Amara, the woman she was always meant to be. "I'm so proud of you," I said again, my voice full of emotion. "And no matter where you go, no matter what you do, you'll always be my daughter. Always." She smiled up at me, her eyes shining with gratitude. "And you'll always be my mama. I'm not going anywhere, Mama. I'm just going somewhere new." I squeezed her hand, knowing that she would continue to navigate the world with grace and strength, just as she always had. And no matter how far she went, no matter how many new worlds she would discover, I would always be there, proud, supportive, and loving her every step of the way. Because no matter what, she was my daughter. Always. As the years continued to unfold, I found myself in a place of peace I hadn't expected. Watching Amara take on the world, building her career and forging her identity with every passing day, brought both joy and a quiet sense of pride. But what I didn't anticipate was how much I would continue to learn from her, how her courage, her resilience, and her ability to balance her two worlds would forever change the way I saw myself. Amara's career as an artist took off in ways I could never have predicted. She began collaborating with renowned artists, her work shown in major galleries around the country, and soon her voice was not just heard but celebrated. She became an advocate for the marginalized voices within the art community, using her platform to highlight issues of racial inequality, identity, and representation. One evening, after a particularly successful art installation opening in Chicago, I found myself in my kitchen, scrolling through some of the photos from the event. There she was, standing tall and confident next to one of her Picasso painting that had become the centerpiece of the exhibit. She looked so much like the little girl I once held in my arms, and yet she had become someone so much more. I couldn't help but smile to myself, thinking about how much she had grown and how much her journey had shaped her. A few weeks later, Amara called me, excitement and nerves lacing her voice. "Mama, I've been invited to speak at an art panel in London. It's a big deal, and I want you to come with me. I want you there." My heart skipped a beat. The thought of traveling with her, watching her speak in front of an international audience, filled me with both pride and wonder. Of course, baby, I wouldn't miss it for the world. We spent a week in London, and it was one of the most surreal and heartwarming experiences I had ever had. I watched as she spoke passionately about her journey, her struggles, her triumphs, and her vision for the future of art. She shared the complexities of her identity and how it shaped her as an artist, as a person. I had never seen her so certain of her place in the world. Later that evening, we walked through the city, just the two of us. The night air was crisp, and the streets were bustling with life. Amara was quiet for a moment, lost in thought, before she turned to me with a smile. I think I've found my balance, Mama," she said, her voice steady and sure. "I've finally realized that I don't have to choose between the two parts of me. I can be all of it. I can be Black and I can be an artist. I can be your daughter and Tasha's daughter, and none of those things cancel out the other." I stopped walking, letting her words sink in. The weight of them felt like a gift. I had watched her struggle, question herself, and doubt where she belonged. But now here she was, confident, unafraid, fully embracing everything she was. "I'm so proud of you, Amara," I whispered, feeling the tears prick at my eyes. "You've always known who you are. I've just been lucky enough to watch you grow into it." She laughed softly, squeezing my hand. "You taught me how to believe in myself, Mama. You and Tasha both did." The love I felt for Amara in that moment was overwhelming. She was no longer the little girl I had picked up off the street. She was a Forza woman who had found her voice, her place, and the strength to stand tall in her truth. And I was in awe of her. As the days passed, we continued to explore London together. But I realized something I hadn't fully acknowledged before. Amara's journey had shaped me just as much as it had shaped her. Watching her find her balance, her confidence, and her peace made me rethink my own path. I had spent so much time focusing on supporting her that I hadn't truly realized how much she had helped me along the way. She had taught me what it meant to love without limits, to give space for someone to grow, and to find joy in watching them thrive. She had taught me that family wasn't just about blood. It was about the love, the respect, and the strength we gave each other. Before we left London, Amara stood in front of her latest art piece in the gallery, her eyes reflecting a quiet pride. She turned to me and said, "This one's for you, Mama. All the love you gave me, all the sacrifices. This is my way of saying thank you." I stepped up beside her, gazing at the painting. It was beautiful, vivid colors blending together in a stunning display of strength, vulnerability, and hope, a perfect reflection of who she was and who she had become. "You don't have to thank me," I said, choking back tears. "Watching you become this person is all the thanks I'll ever need." We stood there for a while, side by side, both of us taking in the piece that Amara had created not just with her hands but with her heart. It was a symbol of everything she had fought for, everything she had come to understand about herself and her world. And as I looked at her, at the woman she had become, I realized that while I had spent so many years worrying about whether I was doing enough, whether I was enough, she had already answered those questions for me. She was enough. She always had been. She was more than enough. And I was so incredibly proud to be her mother. As we headed back home, I knew that Amara's journey was far from over. There were still many challenges ahead, both for her and for Mebute. I also knew that she had everything she needed to face them. She had her identity, her purpose, and a love so strong that nothing could shake it. And I would always be there, cheering her on just as I always had. No matter where life took her, no matter where her art would take her, she would always have a home with me. Always.